Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lizzie. My full name is Elizabeth Richard Bach. I come from Copenhagen, Denmark. So I'm in the cold north of our little lovely globe. I am 55 years old. So my journey within this world has been somewhat long. I have worked within the field of people and culture for my whole life, basically. I started out in shipping when I was very young. And has then been moving around in various businesses, from shipping to pharmaceuticals to hospitality. I have then been an independent consultant since 2010, started out right in the middle of the financial crisis, and have now spent more than 15 years working with companies that wants to make a difference for the people that they have on board. What drove me into the specific field of diversity and inclusion was actually COVID. During COVID, I experienced, like everybody else, the enormous influence it had on everybody to all of a sudden be cut off from our tribes, be cut off from the communities that we were part of. I participated in a couple of research projects run by Copenhagen Business School here in Denmark on trying to figure out what would happen to us, what was the role of HR, human resources, in handling this crisis, both during and after COVID. And a lot of the predictions we came up with sadly came through. Most of all, a lot of long-term sickness, PTSD-like stories. So a lot of physical and psychological impact from the fact that we were cut off from each other. And of course, also the loads of uncertainty that rolled with COVID. So that's sort of what happened. Why did I turn my gaze up until over on diversity and inclusion? Now, I've always been driven by motivation. I've always been driven by what makes us tick as humans. My personal values are courage, being present, and adventure. I think that we owe it to the world to be happy. We owe it to the world to find our purpose, because we're all unique, and we owe it to give the world who we are and who we are meant to be, and not try to just fit into somebody else's mold. In the beginning, looking at diversity and inclusion, for me, I saw that many of the activities, many of the actions that were taken on that agenda by companies were very much check boxes like, okay, somebody wants us to do this, so now we're just going to follow the statistic that is most easy for us to fulfill. I know this is very, on edge, and of course I'm putting people in a box here, but just to say that was my perspective. I wasn't really motivated by it because I felt like it was sort of a facade, something that people were doing, not because they felt it was the right thing to do, but because they felt this was something that other people wanted them to do. So I wasn't really moved by it. But then a couple of years ago, we added the B, the belongingness, not realizing that it had always been part of diversity and inclusion as part of the inclusion, but spelling it out loud, the B, made me realize that, wow, now I get it. Because to me, diversity you can tick off as numbers on a sheet. Inclusion you can even tick off as numbers on a sheet. Equity you can certainly tick off as numbers on a sheet. But without really caring and listening to the people that you wish to make a diversity and inclusion effort towards. So that's when I got on board. That's when I went, I can work with this. This is so much in line with my own personal purpose of making people happy, making people be the best they can be, and making them believe that their true self is actually of value, no matter who they are and what their true self is. So I spent a year thinking about it and working with it. I've spent 25 years in people and culture, so I'm a very broad and versatile people and culture specialist. I've worked with everything and every angle in people and culture. I have a profiling background, working today with the predictive index in an effort to help organizations understand the people that they are working with and ensure that we are all in the right position and with the best possible opportunities to succeed in that position. So I founded DEIB Ignite with the purpose of helping everybody getting started on their journey towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And what is perhaps a little bit different with the company DEIB Ignite is that we see DEIB as a societal responsibility rather than just a corporate responsibility. So we want to work with kindergartens, we want to work with municipalities, we want to work with NGOs, we want to work with any kind of community where people come together, schools. We want to make sure that no matter where you are in life, you have the tools and you have the will and knowledge to engage with the people around you in a DEIB manner. So that was sort of the foundations of DEIB Ignite. And that has led us to develop some very simple products, basically. A 22-hour product towards how to go from a strategic intent, what do I want to do with my DEIB efforts, towards how can I then actually do it. And then we are very, very closely linked to Dr. Purnima Luthra, an amazing theorist. She's written some of the best books in my perspective on this topic. I really, really love her. She's written Diversifying Diversity and Becoming an Active Ally. And we're actively working on just these two areas. So that was sort of a leap into where I am now. And just going back to the story leading up to it, well, coming out of COVID, what I saw when I walked the hallways of the companies that I helped during that period of time, obviously working within the field of people and culture in Denmark, all we did was fire people or send people home to work without any contact with anybody. In Denmark, we were fortunate enough to have a government that actually tried to help the companies with compensating them for people staying on. So to say that in short was that if you were a company and you agreed to send your people home on certain terms, and those terms being they were not allowed to have any contact work-wise with the company, they were not allowed to do any work that was company related in any way, then you would get a small compensation from the government in the hope that you could then reduce the number of fires that you would have to make, and in that way reduce the catastrophic effects on the economy post-COVID. So that was sort of the people and culture game in Denmark during COVID, that we were firing huge amounts of people. The companies that I was helping, they were firing up to 75, 80% of their employees, and the remaining 20% was sent home with no contact whatsoever other than regular phone calls or team calls with their leaders. And during that time, I was in a business, I was helping with hospitality in particular. And in Denmark, that business is renowned for taking on the highest amount of people with non-ethnical Danish backgrounds, that being refugees of any sorts. So we had a large amount of refugees, and being in the business of taking on a lot of refugees, obviously we'd been exposed to a lot of people with a lot of problems, with PTSD, with traumas of any kind, both physical and psychological. And one day I'm walking out the halls of one of these companies, and I see a leader sitting in one of the corners, and I go like, bye-bye, hope you're okay, see you soon. And then I can see, or I can hear her voice trembling. And I instantly, turn around and have the eye contact above the mask. And I could see the person tearing up. And obviously I went as close as I was allowed to. And I said, "Hey, are you okay? You don't sound as if you're okay." And she said, "No, I'm not okay. Lizzie," she said, "I've always thought that I understood, that I had empathy towards the people that we were hiring, that were open about the fact that they might have PTSD or other traumas. I always thought I understood where they came from. I always thought I understood their pain. But these past 6 months, where I've watched my colleagues at the end of every month crying, sitting, if they were in office or if they were at home, crying, trembling, unable to connect with anybody, just scared out of their minds, fearful of, would they be the next to be let go? What would happen tomorrow? Who was sick now? Are we going to lose anybody?" She said, "I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what to do." So that story really kickstarted, or that encounter really kickstarted my feeling of, I have to make a difference in this world. Life is too short just to stay in the hamster wheel. I was already talking to people about how to get out of the hamster wheel, how to take responsibility of your own life. But all of a sudden it just became real. It was like, listen, you might be gone tomorrow. It was not fatalistic. It's just, the acknowledgement that this is actually happening. You don't know how long time you have. You can't just continue putting out doing good until you have the time, or the timing is right, or you have the means, or whatever. We have to start doing good now, because we have the world now. This is where we're living now. So that's what started all my thoughts about how can I convert what I'm doing now, which was primarily talent optimization. How can we perform better? How can we do better in the job, towards how can we be more purpose-driven? Because to me, purpose is at the center of happiness. I have never felt, or I've never met a happy person that did not know their purpose. I have never personally felt happy myself without being connected to my purpose. So that kickstarted this whole, how can we do better? How can we live to our fullest in the world that we are in, do good towards ourselves, and then do good to others and with others. And through that, have a happy life where we are productive, where we are creating a world of peace, of belongingness, of diversity, where people feel included, where people feel safe to be who they are, where we give our young children the tools from an early age to become those individuals that know how to engage in an inclusive manner, that know how to inspect and be critical and curious about their own bias, and just be wonderful human beings. And I truly believe that towards that end, very similar to the fact that some people are repeating that if everybody just knew how to meditate, and then there would be peace in the world within 7 years. I also truly believe that if anybody just knew how to be an active ally, if anybody just lived in a DEIB culture, feeling included and supported, feeling that they belong, that we would actually move towards peace and togetherness, which is in Europe right now very, very much on everybody's mind due to the gruesome conflicts in Ukraine and now also in Gaza. So that's how I ended up where I am right now.
Wow, Elizabeth, you have been on quite a journey with your
True.
career. They say that the Chinese write the word for crisis with two symbols. One stands for crisis, the other stands for opportunity.
Yeah.
And COVID-19 presented the whole world with a very, very serious crisis. But what I'm hearing from what you're saying is there was an opportunity too for us to do things differently,
Yeah.
relate differently to each other, and find ways to create the inclusion that is missing for a lot of people from marginalized communities.
Yeah.
Now, what fascinates me about everything you're sharing is that we all know that these are things we need to be aware of. They should be in the foreground of our minds, but sometimes it's not easy.
You're so right.
So it's not an easy journey for most people, especially in transforming institutional cultures.
Exactly.
So how do you integrate the concepts of trust and purpose, your strategies for organizational development and talent optimization?
It's such a good question, and let me just start by what I love what you're saying about the Chinese word for chance, because for crisis, because that is so true, and I truly believe that's what happened during COVID. Apart from the critical physiological and psychological effects that it had on many people, it forced us to take a pause. I also come out of a Franklin Covey tradition, where one of
Okay.
the things that Stephen Covey said was, try to pull action and reaction from each other and create that space of reflection.
Yes.
And that was, I think, what COVID did. It forced us into that space of reflection. And due to the speed with which the world has developed throughout the last, 50 years,
Yes.
we have been
Mm-hmm.
forced into this action, reaction. And it has reduced our ability to make that pause and to think and reflect about what we're doing, how we engage. So that's what I think was the chance built into the COVID crisis, the reflection. And I also saw that in what people were seeking out, what they were reading during COVID. It was things towards happiness. It was things towards how do I become more self-centered? How do I become more self-aware? So it was, self-insight and purpose and happiness that people were looking into. And that
Yes.
gave me this hope that we still have that spark, we still have that inert will to engage and be the best version of ourselves. So what I did was to say, many of the people that I have talked to looked on DEIB and looked at the whole diversity and inclusion agenda as being huge. And it
Yeah.
is, like, compared to the saying of how do you eat an elephant? One tiny bit, right? One
Time.
tiny bit at a time. Just
Yes.
And that's what I try to do, is say to people, you know what? DEIB is huge. It's an endless agenda. It's a destination. Sorry, it's not a destination. It's a journey, which
Journey,
is a
yeah.
very different way of thinking, right? Because we've been brought up by, this is the goal, this is what you have to do, and this is, so we're very goal oriented, which is good because a goal gives you purpose.
Yeah.
But a goal without purpose is just a goal. So
Yes.
what I've tried to do is create this journey. I call it 2-5-15. It's 22 hours to get you up and started. So what we basically do is I start 2 hours talking about what is your intent with diversity and inclusion. What is your
Right.
intent? What is your purpose? What do you want? What kind of difference do you want to make? Get that
Yes.
down. So that's the intent. Then we use 5 hours talking about your tactics. So if this is your intent and this is the world you're living in, that can be a
Yeah.
company, that can be a kindred, this is your community. If
Yeah.
this is your intent and this is your community, what would be the low-hanging fruits? What would be the easy first steps? What would be
Yeah.
the logical thing to do? So helping them define the little bits of the elephant that makes sense towards their purpose. Now, once
Okay.
we've done that, we used 15 hours to then be very operational. So those 15 hours is typically centered around the behaviors of active allyship, going, well, these are the 7 behaviors of active allyship. Which of these behaviors is perhaps easiest for you to adapt or adopt? Where are
Yeah.
you already really good? Or is there a huge problem in one of them where you go, if we improve on this, we would be so much better off? Um, and we have a
Now,
little, yeah, it's just a
before you move on,
story.
give us those 7 principles of allyship, because
Well,
allyship is a
yeah,
real game changer in this whole diversity conversation.
it
Can you
is.
highlight?
Sorry, one more time.
I'm saying, can you highlight those 7 principles of allyship?
Yes, obviously I can. And first of all, just to make sure, these have been highlighted by Dr. Purnima Luthra, which I briefly mentioned in the beginning of this chat, and she's really done a wonderful work. Now, I'm just going to be very brief. So the first of the behavior is what we call honest introspection. And that is basically you being able to look at yourself in an honest way and realize how you interact with other people. What are your biases? We
Yeah.
got humble acknowledgement, being able to humbly acknowledge who is around you, what is around you, and be curious about what other people think, where they're coming from. Then we have empathetic engagement. Obviously, that also goes into in your knowledge about other people. Are you able to truly understand and empathize with them? Then we move into authentic conversations. Can
Okay.
you engage in an authentic conversation where you offer your true authentic self, but that you also allow other people to present their true authentic self? Then you have vulnerable interactions. It goes very much hand in hand with the authenticity of your conversations. How do you interact with other people? Do you have the level of trust to be vulnerable, to
Yeah.
acknowledge what you can and cannot do? Finally, you also have courageous responsibilities, standing up for other people, speaking up, speaking truth to power, being the courageous ally that knows when you have to speak up on behalf of others, when you see injustices. And then finally, a deep curiosity, a deep willing to understand what is going on from an unbiased, open, authentic, vulnerable perspective. So that is a very, very short walkthrough of the behaviors. But I think it gives you the flavor of the behaviors are basic, but they are all about how do you stand up for and with others in the
Yeah.
right way, not in a patronizing way, not in a way coming from privilege or whatever, knowing your privileges and being humble about them, and then helping others, being an ally and support them and enable yourself and others in being who you truly are, which is obviously a huge benefit for everything and everyone around us.
Yes, yes, I love that. Now, given your focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see these elements playing a role in shaping the future of work?
Oh, it's such a lovely question, because working with businesses, which is obviously a large part of what I do, the first question you're always asked is, well, what is the business case here? We have to, and we have to accept that, because that's the world we live in right now, right? We live in an economy. We
Yeah,
live in this for that world. We live in, if you want me and my knowledge, you have to give me some money.
yes,
Um,
yes,
so without being radical, I truly believe that we will at some point reimagine a capitalistic world. I believe that we will come beyond something what we today is calling capitalism. But
mhm,
up until that point, we are living in an economic world, so we are exchanging economic things. And to that
yes,
end, obviously, we need to be able to show people what is the benefits of it.
yeah,
So I usually start out by saying, well, first of all, you need to recognize that prioritizing DEIB, well, it's not only the right thing to do, it's also a very smart business decision.
yes,
No matter what type of business you do, right?
yeah,
Research has already shown that, well, if you create a diverse organization, if you just focus on diversity, that is not good. It's
mm,
obvious, because you become fragmented. But we actually
yeah,
have, I think it was Clover Pop back in 2017 that came up and said, well, research actually shows that diversity alone can increase friction by 15%. But
wow,
inclusion can boost your result with 60%. So,
big
so that is,
difference.
that's just a very brief top of the iceberg of what diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging can do for you and your business. And beneath that, you have, increased innovation, increased productivity, increased profitability, better mental health, better empathy, commitment and loyalty, engagement and morale. You attract talent, you retain talent, you become better at making decisions, you get a better brand, you get higher customer loyalty, you reduce your costs, you have fewer mistakes and errors, you have, you know, low discrimination, no harassment, you reduce your bias, you even can detect, a lower case of legal cases. And, so the benefits are endless. And
Yeah, the
now
ripple effect is amazing.
it is. And you have the business cases now. So luckily now I got like pages upon pages, and I can ask people, so in which field would you want to see a payoff? And
Right.
then if they come up with that field, I can have research saying, well, research shows us that if you're looking into that field, this would be the benefits real
Yes.
from working with diversity and inclusion. And that is starting to opening the gates. That combined with the message of, we can get you started in 22 hours.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that is the start.
Amazing.
And then it's a journey, and check in every once in a while how you're doing. Make
Mm,
sure that you measure, make sure that you engage in an authentic dialogue, that you're listening to your employee resource groups, truly listen, act on what they're saying.
yes.
Um, yeah, so the commitment, the engagement towards DIVE is literally, where you succeed and how you not fail, to continue to be engaged, continue to listen to the community that you're engaged in. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the impact of HR policies on organizational
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
In your experience, how do impactful HR policies and practices contribute to the development of a
Mm.
purposeful organizational culture?
Well, first of all, I think policies and politics are good because they create and can create the frames that you're working within.
Yes.
I also think they can be detrimental if you use them as rules.
Ah,
So I think the whole point is that the rules, the process, the policies and the structures, the policies and the politics are in place to
okay.
say this is the game we're playing. I use the metaphor of I don't know if you have that in Australia, but in Denmark we have a lot of indoor sports arenas. In those
Right.
sports arenas, you have a gazillion amount of lines on the floor in different colors. So that if you're
Right.
playing basketball, you're following the right line, the red lines. If you're
Yes.
playing soccer, you're following the blue lines. So the politics and the procedures are there to show your community what color of lines you are playing within.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's how they're good. Now, they will never help you build a culture. That's where active allyship comes in, because culture is the sum of everybody's behavior,
Yes.
and politics does not create behavior.
No,
It
it
just
doesn't.
it just shows you a direction. It just shows you some goes and no goes. So where you want to go is you have to start with the intent. You have to start with the purpose. And then you have to align that purpose with specific behavior, saying, this is how we have to act and behave if we want to become our purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you have to have the behavior as the root of your policies, and they must never become a rule. They are a guideline that you have a
That's there.
dialogue about.
That's there. So, lastly, what advice would you give to future leaders and HR professionals who aspire to build more inclusive, equitable, and high performing organizations?
First of all, get engaged. Start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Every little act is an act towards, being better.
Okay.
I think a lot of us are fearful of acting because we're fearful of making mistakes. Making
Yes.
mistakes is part of the journey. It makes you human. I celebrate people that make mistakes. I make them every day. I love it because I learn from them. So make mistakes and create the room for making mistakes. Be curious. Engage. I mean, your podcast is a wonderful example. We have tons of resources. So be curious, go out there, go on LinkedIn and look up diversity and inclusion groups. And
Yes.
then don't be afraid, be courageous. Don't be afraid. What I have learned starting my journey in diversity and inclusion at a very late time in my life, I was 50 plus when I started.
Mm-hmm.
Really understanding the point of diversity and inclusion. And was that embarrassing? Yes, it was embarrassing because I've been exposed to an international community my whole life. I thought I was pro this, I've been Black Lives Matter, I've been everything without understanding truly what it meant. So it's never too late. And I don't think it's embarrassing. I think the only thing that's embarrassing is not doing anything.
Yeah.
So get out there, be courageous and be curious.
Wow. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming online. It's been an absolute honor to be able to go into your mind and learn from you tonight. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. If you want to get hold of Elizabeth, I have her website scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Please reach out. Please learn. Be curious and take action. It's no good to learn about these concepts and not implement them. So I will be back again tomorrow with yet another amazing guest. Have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Elizabeth, thanks again for the interview.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye for now, everybody. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open,